Dell looks to be getting back into the handheld market with a new smartphone. It's launching not in the US, but it is actually smart for this company to relaunch a smartphone. We asked Iyaz Akthar, managing editor of TechVie, and Dana Wollman from Laptop Magazine.
Save time and money by skipping business trips and using GoToMeeting. Visit gotomeeting.com/techpodcast and get 30 days for free.
Dell is launching a smartphone in Brazil and China, and while we don't know a lot of the details about the Mini 3i, we do know that Dell has been long out of the handheld game ever since they exited from their Axiom line, which was a standalone PDA a few years back. I think 2007 was when they left that behind. Dana, is it a smart idea for Dell to really get back in this in the smartphone and handheld market, given all the competitors like Google, Palm, of course, Apple?
Absolutely. I think Dell really belongs in the smartphone market, if only because the smartphone market is growing much too fast for Dell to ignore it. I think it would really be losing out on a share of a really hugely growing market if it did ignore that segment. The problem is that it really needs to rely not just on its brand potential, but on the features that it can bring to the table to differentiate its phone from all the others that are on the market, as you suggested.
So, what are some of the things that they need to do to differentiate? I mean, are there specific ways that you can think where maybe Palm, maybe the Droid or the iPhone really haven't exploited fully, or do they kind of just need to a little bit of just copy kind of what's good right now?
I think they did a smart thing by picking Android up front. If they skin it and it actually has a much more usable feel for people, that would be good. I don't know what version of Android it's running. If it's like Droid running 2.0, that's supposed to be very good. So it's a smart thing that they're not trying to reinvent the wheel. They're not trying to come up with their own OS. Going with Android, I think, is their smartest thing that they're doing right now.
So at this point, I mean, we have essentially dozens of Android devices coming out over the next year. China and Brazil, it seems like a good move for Dell to sort of pick off other markets. Do you see this phone coming to America, Dana? And does Dell really need to have a presence here to really make this successful, or can they just kind of hang out overseas and chip away at other places where the iPhone and maybe the Droid don't exist?
I do see the phone coming to America, again, because provided carriers will take it, of course, and if they take it, it has to be because it's an interesting phone. There was a rumor several months back, earlier this year, that Dell had been shopping around a smartphone in the States and that carriers had rejected it. So now we're hearing a rumor that AT&T has picked it up, and AT&T hasn't made any announcements. In fact, they haven't announced any Android device at all yet. So we would hope, at least, that if a carrier, AT&T or otherwise, is picking up the phone, that it is an interesting one, that it doesn't just rely on Dell's cachet in consumer electronics, but that it does bring something interesting to the table, whether it's a skin such as the kind that Motorola or HTC have added on top of Android. I would hope that that's what that means.
Yeah. So what are some of the disasters that Dell could potentially run into? I mean, we've seen phones that essentially come out and flop, and I mean, we really haven't seen a lot of Android is so new that it's hard for us to say, if Android devices do this, it's a big problem. But are there some obvious pitfalls that Dell should really avoid here?
Well, whoever was behind the whole Dell DJ and the Dell Diddy, they should keep them away from the phone. I think that's probably part of it. I mean, if they can get this thing launched the same way they did their Mini line, I mean, that they were late to the party to that too. I think the netbook market had been established at that point, and they did follow up with an actual pretty cool product. So if they basically follow their own model, they should be okay. I mean,
we'll follow some of their own models, not all of them.
Well, yeah, just their Mini line. That's probably why they called it the Mini and not the Axiom 2.
Yeah, exactly.
Or the Diddy. Wow.
Well, so Dana, I mean, Iyaz says that they need to sort of take a netbook approach. I mean, what sort of pitfalls do you sort of see that Dell really could run into? I mean, is there anything off the top of your head where you think Dell, watch out for this?
Well, it's interesting you should mention the netbook comparison. Of course, Dell was already a leader in the computing space, so for them to enter the netbook market even late wasn't such a stretch. But for instance, Nokia, if you want to do the reverse connection, Nokia was a phone maker that entered the netbook market, and we recently gave it a pretty middling review because it entered the market late and made a lot of mistakes. So we were almost less forgiving of those mistakes because they made them late and because they were an unexpected player in the market. So I'm wondering if the same dynamic would happen if Dell entered the smartphone market, a market it really hasn't been in, and made certain mistakes. For instance, I know in China it's leaving 3G out of the phone. God forbid it leads it out of the phone in the US. It's really going to take a pounding for that. So
Yeah, definitely. I mean,
I can see critics being very unforgiving of Dell if they make any mistakes.
I think at this point, Dell really has to execute perfectly if they're going to launch this here. And maybe, a budget device. If they're launching this in Brazil and China, you figure that the price is going to be a little bit lower, especially for a place like Brazil where, consumer electronics manufacturers don't typically launch products there. They launch them in bigger markets because they like the bigger margins, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, you figure maybe they can keep the price down and maybe sort of have it be on that level of the Pixie where, the Palm Pixie's, I think, launching at some ridiculous price at Walmart for like $30. And, it's a really robust smartphone. So if you have an Android device, it's sort of a similar class maybe. Maybe Dell could actually pull something off. We'll have to see, though, where they go with that. Guys, thanks for being on the show. Dana Wollman, who's a senior writer for Laptop Magazine, thanks for being on the program. Also, Iyaz Akthar, thanks for coming on the show. He's the managing editor of TechVie. He does lots of stuff over here. You can catch him doing Headline Show and a bunch of other stuff. So, Iyaz, thanks for being on the show as well.
No problem.
I'm Randall Bennett. Don't forget, you can catch us on iTunes. We're on YouTube. We're everywhere, so catch us somewhere. See ya.
Use promo code AFTVIFL1 and save 15% off any order at footlocker.com.